Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please join our community by subscribing to us on the socials. Our handle on all platforms is at N2E Fantasy. We're also available on all major podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
On this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, we are recapping all Week 9 action of the NFL. But first, today was the trade deadline day, so we will be covering some of the juicier NFL news. So, Jeff, why don't we get started with the sad news for New York Saints fans out there? Why don't you tell us what happened today?
So Saints fire their head coach, Dennis Allen. So he is just gone. I believe they promoted their special teams coordinator, who will be their head coach going forward. But the Sean Payton era appears to be fully over in Saints land. But they still have all of their old players, all of their old contracts. And we will see if they can retool on the fly. Do you believe that they'll be able to retool on the fly?
No, I mean, they just traded away a couple guys, so I think that they probably have a losing season the rest of the way. They might look a little bit better on some matchups, but I don't really foresee them doing that well the rest of the year.
I would concur there. They did just recently extend Elvin Kamara, so he'll be there for another 2 seasons. But that was not the only coaching news right now. The Raiders bring in Norv Turner to run the offense with his son Scott Turner. An OC change, which is a really big change in year one for Antonio Pierce. Do you believe that he made the incorrect decision at offensive coordinator? And do you believe this will affect his long-term prospects with the Las Vegas Raiders?
I think this move is better than his original hiring of Luke Getsy. Like, I never liked the Luke Getsy hiring. Bringing Norv Turner's son and bringing Norv Turner in, I think that that's a better move that has a chance to be helpful this year. However, at this point in the year, don't know that it will really move the needle enough. But maybe if they start showing positive signs, maybe it'll help Antonio Pierce keep his job.
Yeah, how long do you think that leash is? Do you think that he is likely to have a year 2, or do you think it's a one and done for him?
I think it keeps getting shorter. If he gets some really nice wins against some tough teams, it might convince Mark Davis to keep him the rest of the year and maybe into the next year. But if he keeps self-destructing, it might just be one and done for him.
All right. So we will keep an eye on that. But we have a little bit more sombering news here as the Cowboys season appears to be in serious jeopardy right now because they are considering placing quarterback Dak Prescott on IR with a hamstring injury. I don't believe the transaction is official yet, but Jerry Jones has floated out that idea. So we will see what that looks like in the next couple of days. But do you believe that the Cowboy season is over now?
I think he is going on IR, and I can't imagine the Cowboys even making the playoffs at this point.
And that's even with them trading a 4th-round pick to Carolina to acquire wide receiver Jonathan Mingo, who was a 2nd-round pick from Carolina just last year. And Dallas gets a 7th-round pick back. So you don't think that the Jonathan Mingo trade's going to move the needle for Dallas right now?
It doesn't make any sense to me. They're not competitive anymore. It doesn't make any sense to trade for Mingo now when he doesn't even get to play with Dak Prescott. Nothing about this makes sense other than the fact the Panthers only think his trade value will go down. If that's the case, then the Panthers are the only ones who made the most of the situation.
Yeah, it seems like Dave Canales has decided that Jonathan Mingo is not going to be a thing in Carolina, and they just decided to move him for what they could get. So that is a really good move and a really good trade by the Carolina Panthers if they really believe Jonathan Mingo was not in their future.
I hope this is a better landing spot for Mingo for next season because he is someone that the fantasy community liked a year ago, the potential of. He just hasn't fully shown it, although, I mean, he already has over 400 yards halfway through the season, on pace for maybe 900 yards with the Panthers, which isn't nothing. So it's not terrible. It just doesn't make sense for Dallas at this moment.
Absolutely. But there were a few other offensive trades that really made sense for some teams here. The Bears finally trade running back Khalil Herbert. I know we've talked about this offline and maybe even online a few times, but they traded him to Cincinnati for a 7th-round pick. And Zach Moss is injured and going on IR, and his season appears to be over. So that kind of makes sense of this trade here.
Well, I guess the Bears were keeping Khalil Herbert on the shelf exclusively for a trade opportunity, but that lowers his value because people don't see it. So they only got a seventh. I expect that it's going to be Chase Brown as the lead back for Cincinnati. I don't think that Khalil Herbert's going to threaten that. I do think he's going to be a very solid contributor as a rotational back in Cincinnati. Like once he learns the playbook and gets some run, I think he'll be good depth, and I think that he'll be potentially usable in fantasy in a couple weeks.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. And I think this really just bumps Chase Brown to the tippy top of the running back twos now that I would consider starting every week.
Yeah, I think Chase Brown will live up to my off-season hype for him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of off-season hype, we really liked the Jets signing wide receiver Mike Williams. However, quarterback Aaron Rodgers has soured on Mike Williams a little bit, and therefore the Jets trade Mike Williams to Pittsburgh for a 5th-round pick. So he'll be going to Pittsburgh playing with Russell Wilson, who desperately needs a number 2 and a number 3 weapon. I know you believe in Kelvin Austin, but I don't think Kelvin Austin's enough to continue to drive this offense forward opposite George Pickens.
Don't think that Mike Williams, like, I don't know what Mike Williams is going to be in Pittsburgh. I don't know if there's enough targets to go around to make him useful, but he's going to get more targets than in New York. He already lost Aaron Rodgers' trust for the most part, so it can only potentially go up from here, I think. But this is a move that the Pittsburgh Beats writers have been talking about for 2 or 3 weeks now. That was the most likely wide receiver to make it to Pittsburgh, and it happened. So it's something that is worth a speculative add in redraft leagues if he's on the waiver wires, and we'll see if he can become a solid wide receiver 2 to George Pickens.
Yeah, that is my hope. So we will see what happens there. And all right, I think that does it for league news. It was kind of a busy trade deadline. There was a few defensive players that also moved. Overall, one of the busier trade deadlines in recent memory.
Okay, we can move on to the recap portion now. And just a reminder, the Steelers and 49ers were on a bye week. We open up with the Halloween Thursday night matchup between the Texans and the Jets. We both picked the New York Jets, and the Jets definitely won this game. Jeff, are the Texans done, or the Jets officially back in the playoff race? What do you think?
Jets should have scored more in this game than they did. There was a Malachi Corley fumble at the 1-yard line where he was celebrating prematurely. So that'll be something that rookie needs to fix and correct and learn on, and pretty quickly, before Aaron Rodgers decides that he doesn't want to throw or give him the ball anymore. But the game went exactly how you and I predicted it. Diggs and Collins are out. Diggs will be out for the rest of the year. Collins may return as early as this upcoming week. But just Dell out there, it's not enough firepower for the Texans. And that alone, plus the inability to protect Stroud, is two concerning pieces for the Texans going forward. So they're going to have to protect Stroud, and they're going to have to make sure that their weapons stay healthy, because Collins in and out of the lineup would not be a good situation here.
Oh,
But
I think part of their struggles have been because Nico Collins hasn't been in, and he's the one that stretches the field and pulls the defenders back. But for whatever reason, first it was last year with the Texans not being able to run block. This year they can run block, but now they can't pass block. And in this game, Stroud looked completely rattled, throwing wildly and erratically. His eyes were wide the whole game. I've not seen him look that poor in I don't think his entire career. Maybe the first couple weeks of his rookie year last year, but it was bad. It was really bad. They didn't do anything to really address the offensive line. They just did a minor pickup to their practice squad. They didn't do any kind of trade. Didn't even bring in another wide receiver or anything. I think they're going to make the playoffs by default by winning their division. I don't think that they're going to go anywhere in the playoffs.
yeah, I'm really concerned about them right now, and they didn't make any moves other than trading away a defensive tackle during the trade deadlines. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's a vote of confidence for the guys that they have, but I don't know if they have what it takes to beat Buffalo again. I don't know if they have what it takes to beat Kansas City. Baltimore is going to be a really tough game for everybody, but we both got this game right. We both picked the Jets, and it was really nice to see Tank Dell, Devontae Adams, and Garrett Wilson have really big games.
Defensive side is because a lot of their defensive starters are coming back from injury or suspension. So they probably felt like they could afford to lose them.
So we can hop over to Sunday's slate of games. And let's remember the Steelers and the 49ers were on bye, so we have 14 more games to go over. And the first one is the Cowboys at the Falcons. But the big news here is the Dak Prescott injury, which Cousins outdueled Dak in this one. Cowboy season is nearly over. And it looks like Bijan leads the backfield this week for the Falcons. So that means, because they've been flipping back and forth, it means that the backfield should be split again next week, and Algier should be equally as used as Bijan. So Bijan gets a heavy game, and then they go back to split. Then heavy game, back to split.
Yeah, I think they should just stick with Bijan. I mean, I don't hate Algier, but Bijan should be their workhorse. I'm concerned, though, with Drake London getting a hip pointer injury in this game, that he might be out for a couple weeks.
Absolutely. And
As
they
we
should have
talked,
really looked at a wide receiver target as well,
yeah, they
especially if they
absolutely
wanted to
should
be
have,
taken
but that just
seriously.
means Kyle Pitts will be more involved than he was in this matchup.
Yeah, they'll just start putting their top corner on Kyle Pitts because there's no one
Right.
else to throw to. But you picked Dallas. You thought Dallas's backs were against the wall, and this was going to be the game that they responded on. And I picked Atlanta. I'm sorry, Alex. Got this one
Yeah.
right. You got this one wrong.
I mean, to be fair, it's not like either one of us thought Dak Prescott was going to get hurt in the middle of this game either.
That's correct. If you're Dallas, who are you starting at quarterback going forward?
I mean, you have to consider Trey Lance, unless he's just so awful in practice. And if that's the case, then it's really Cooper Rush is your only option because the trade deadline passed.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't know what the point of keeping Trey Lance is if he's really that bad at this point. Like, they gave up a fourth for him. That fourth's already gone. Like, why are you doubling down on a mistake? So either start him or cut him is kind of my thought on Trey Lance.
I think they want to get something. I think they want someone to ask them for a trade, but now it's passed. I don't know. I don't know.
Absolutely. And I think he's just going to walk for nothing next year. And I don't even think they'll get a comp pick because I don't think his salary will reach the comp pick formula.
Yeah.
So they may cut him now. So we'll keep a close eye on that, especially as Dak returns from his injury in the next 4 weeks or so.
I guess that comp pick thing, though, they should start him and see if he's even remotely okay. Someone might pay enough to get that comp pick.
Exactly. So that'll be very telling if they don't start him going forward. All right. So we can hop over to the next game, and that's the Broncos at the Ravens. The Ravens won this game. They did make Bo Nix, your buddy there, look like a rookie. Henry and Flowers starred for the Ravens. I thought Flowers was going to have a bad game because I thought he was going to have Patrick Surtain on him. That didn't appear to be the case. And Sutton quietly having a big year this year. So those were my big takeaways from this game. But we both picked the Ravens. We didn't think there was a chance that rookie Bo Nix was going to walk in there and be able to defeat that.
I'll just say, when it comes to this game, I thought in the first half, the game was very close. I know it ended up, the first half ended 24-10, but Sean Payton and the Broncos had like 3 or 4 really risky, very ultra aggressive calls going for it on fourth down to just find. His interception came off of a tipped pass in the first quarter. So I thought Bo Nix could have been better statistically if things went a little bit differently. And let's not forget, he caught his first touchdown pass off of a Philly special play. So Denver really went all out. I just don't think that they have the running back situation figured out. I don't think that they have enough receiving talent either. They're very close to being competitive, and parts of this game showed it.
Right. It'll be interesting to see on the next episode when we release our final projections if you have them as a playoff team or not. But we will get there. Right. So we both picked the Ravens, as I said, and we both won. So that's another victory here. I started off the week pretty hot. This next game here, the Chargers at the Browns, I also won. I picked the Chargers. You picked the Browns. You have been very anti-Chargers this year, but they have been proving to be at least a usable team. They've thrown the ball a lot more than even you predicted. And takeaways from this game, from the Browns' perspective, was that Winston came back down to earth. But I'll still give you your flowers on Tillman. He looked really good in this game. And he's probably a must-own in every league. There's probably a team in every league that could own him. And then you have Nick Chubb, who may not be usable at all this year, as he recovers from his ACL, MCL, and whatever CL tears that he had last year. But to be fair, he has not had the easiest slate of games to be running the football against. I think the Ravens and the Chargers, two of the stronger run games. And then you also have Herbert and Dobbins. They carry the Chargers. And also Quentin Johnston is quietly having a good year. I know you wrote him off after his rookie campaign, but I believe he's a top 24 wide receiver so far in fantasy this year. Maybe less now after the injury.
I think Quentin Johnston, if he doesn't get a big play, then he's not worth starting. You never know when he's going to get the big play. The way the Chargers offense is, they seem to lull the defense into getting bored or tired or just not focusing. And then all of a sudden they scheme a wide receiver wide open. And typically they get like a 20-yard play or something. But Quentin Johnston and Joshua Palmer both got touchdowns on the almost identical plays. Just with Quentin Johnston, he has the speed to take it to the house. So as long as he can catch it, he has a very good chance of taking it to the house with his athleticism. And he's done that at least 3, maybe 4 times this season. So it's not just mistakes from the defense when it happens to at least 2 or 3 different teams. It's got to be scheme related, and Johnston is making the most of it. Greg Roman is getting the most out of not well-rounded wide receiver. Johnston has a chance to keep this role as is and then potentially grow. We just don't know yet whether he can grow or expand his game, but he's very usable right now in fantasy, at least as a wide receiver 3 or flex play.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that he's even rosterable after his rookie campaign. So he is back on rosters and he's wide receiver. I know I said that he was like 24, but he's wide receiver 54 because he missed the last 2 games. Right. We ready to hop over to the next game, or did you have anything more on this one?
I would say Johnson's the big play threat, but I still think Lad McConkey is the wide receiver 1 for this team.
Yep. I think that they are a good one too, and I think they'll probably draft a third receiver next year because I don't think Joshua Palmer is it, and I don't think DJ Shark is it. So we'll kind of see there. All right. So I did keep up the streak with the Raiders at the Bengals, where Joe Burrow threw 5 touchdowns, none to Jamar Chase. I think Chase misses Higgins because it takes the coverage off of him. You also picked Cincinnati and were correct, and this is where Chase Brown took the lead back role, but that was due to a Zach Moss injury, and I expect him to retain it for the rest of the season. And it's appearing that every week that T. Higgins is out, that Mike Gesicki is startable in fantasy, which is an interesting correlation. So we'll see if T. Higgins misses Thursday this week, or if he plays. If he doesn't play, then Gesicki is probably a set it and forget it kind of guy. But as we had mentioned earlier, the Raiders appear to be a little bit of a mess. They fired their offensive coordinator. So we're going to see what direction that the Raiders go after their bye week with Norv and Scott Turner. And a little bit more sad news here. The Bengals rookie tight end, Eric All Jr., he tears his ACL and is out for the rest of the year, and he looked very promising. So anything that you noticed during this game?
Not as promising as Gesicki. Gesicki has made a mission to make you look silly for not choosing him this year. Every
It's
year
only
you
in the
choose him.
non-T Higgins games, because when T plays, he scores around, he's maxed out at 4.1 points. When T doesn't play, he got 24 points and 12 points and 6.7. So
I think Yoshivas and Gesicki are proving that Higgins is not a necessary piece in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, is Chase even necessary? Because Chase seems only usable when Higgins plays. So we will see. Right. So that is what? 5 for 5 for me so far to start off the week. I'll
You
take
had a
it.
much better week results wise than I did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's nice to see. And I believe that I've taken the lead for the year after this week too. So we can kind of go over that after this here. But the next game up is the Dolphins at the Bills. Dolphins made this game competitive, and Tyler Bass, of all people, seals this one with a 61-yarder. And Devon Achan this week was back to a lead back role, and James Cook was underutilized, but Ray Davis took one reception to the house, if I'm not mistaken. So all interesting pieces that are moving right now. And for the Bills, Keon Coleman appears to be injured. Amari Cooper missed this game with an injury. So the Bills need to get a little bit healthier as the season's going along. Anything you'd like to add?
Nope, not much on this matchup.
All right. Well, that makes me 6 for 6 because I picked Buffalo, you picked Buffalo. So told you I started this week off on fire, and it stops there. We thought that New England was going to win because every team that faces Detroit, the next week they lose, but the Titans broke that trend. And Mason Rudolph outduels Drake May in an overtime game, which Drake May had a crazy touchdown pass. And Drake May had almost 100 yards on the ground rushing. That was insane as well. And for the Titans, it looked like Pollard and Ridley carried them to the victory. I don't know what this means for Will Levis going forward because they're going to have that looming decision either this week or next week, but Mason Rudolph at least pulled out a W here.
I think this means Will Levis is done for, in my opinion.
For
They'll
his
probably
career?
move on from him in the offseason if they find someone to trade a decent package for him. Like, if you can get a third or fourth for Will Levis, I would take that in a heartbeat at this stage.
Absolutely.
But Tennessee did a good job shutting down the run game for the Patriots and made them one-dimensional. And this was neck and neck until basically the entire game, and the Tennessee Titans won it towards the end of the fourth quarter. Actually,
Absolutely.
overtime. Right? Overtime.
Yep, there was 3 overtime games this week, if I remember correctly, and that feels like a lot for 1 week of NFL action. But the next game we both got wrong as well, and that was the Saints at the Panthers. Of course, the Panthers would pull out the win here. Looks like Derek Carr injures another wide receiver. This time it was Chris Olave with a concussion, and we saw what Michael Thomas called him out on social media over. So that was an interesting little tidbit there. But the Panthers win with Bryce Young and now out of the top spot for the number 1 pick as of right now. And Kamara, broken hand and all, he was still a beast on the ground and through the air. And he's checked down King with check down Charlie, Derek Carr. But this got the Saints coach fired. And also, the Panthers did not trade Bryce Young, and there were teams in on Bryce Young because next year's quarterback class is rumored to not be great. So there are teams trying to pick off potentially better than rookie quarterbacks. So that might be your Will Levis thought from a few minutes ago that he might get traded in the offseason because this quarterback class may not have as much pomp and circumstance as last year's.
Yeah, it went from like 7 quarterbacks that might make it to the first round to 2, I feel like. So, like, Ewers from Texas, Sanders, Colorado, those guys look like they're gone. Carson's back. Looks like he's not going to be a first round quarterback. The LSU quarterback, can't remember his name, Nussmeier or something. He's not looking like a first round guy. So, very curious how it all shakes out. And it could be why teams have been trying to trade for like an Anthony Richardson or Bryce Young or potentially a Will Levis, which they themselves weren't considered a very good quarterback class either. So that's especially telling.
Absolutely.
But Jeff, is Jatavian Sanders the number 1 receiving option in Carolina now?
He may be, but it looks like Leggett and Coker and Jatavian Sanders are all going to get a shot here to play and play a lot and see what they can do. And I think Bryce Young has to start next week. I don't think you go back to Andy Dalton at this point.
Yeah, I think he did enough positive that you got to keep rolling.
Absolutely. And the fact that Canales hasn't shipped off Bryce Young is a big win for the front office who drafted Bryce Young.
Yeah, I agree. So positive things down there in Carolina. And here I
Hey,
thought they weren't going to get another win, and they got one much sooner.
yeah, I want them to get that number 1 overall pick, but we'll see what happens there. And then we have the next game on the docket here. It was the Commanders at the Giants. This game wasn't terribly too far off. I think the score shows them as closer than it actually was. But Daniels and Jones, not Daniel Jones, Daniels and Jones play well in this one. And I think the Commanders might be playoff bound, but I know we were just talking about that offline, and I don't want to give any spoilers away. But what was interesting for me is in a game where Brian Robinson Jr. was unable to go due to pregame warmups, that it did appear that a lot of his carries went to Chris Rodriguez, a practice squad guy.
Jeff,
Yes.
would you rather have Eckler or would you rather have Nick Chubb?
PPR or half point PPR?
Half point P.
Because PPR would take Eckler all day. It's much closer than it should be. But when Brian Robinson Jr. is in the lineup, Eckler does take a back seat. So I'm going to go Chubb because it does seem like Chubb is the lead guy right now.
Well, I have Austin Eckler available for trade. Would be nice insurance for Brian Robinson for you.
Absolutely, but I'm not trading you Chubb.
Wow, it's the only way to make it work, but cap-wise in that league.
That's what you were getting at. Gotcha.
Yeah.
You're not going
It
to
might
try for
not be,
Justin
but
Jefferson in that trade?
yeah, just throw in Justin Jefferson. He's a scrub, you know? Eckler for Jefferson. You know, a couple years ago, that wouldn't sound so crazy, but this,
Yeah. total side note, but trades in that league somehow always like I inquire about a player and it turns to how can I get Justin Jefferson? And I'm like, you cannot.
It's okay. I haven't tried to get Justin Jefferson from you yet.
Hey, you're a few years away, but maybe eventually.
Maybe if I get enough first round picks, we'll see.
Oh, right. Anything else to add to the Giants in Washington that we noticed?
It was very competitive, which is what I was going for, but Washington did enough to win, and Giants offense is just brutally bad. It's so bad. The defense did a pretty good job of considering that the Commanders have been putting up over 30 points, I feel like, for most of the season. The Giants did good to slow them down. Just Daniel Jones, man. Daniel Jones and this offense is terrible. Brian Dable's going to get fired before the year's over, is my guess.
Right. So we can move on to the next game. I should mention that I picked Washington, you picked the Giants. That's another win right in my column, and unfortunately another loss in your column because I know you don't buy into the Commanders just yet. But the Bears at the Cardinals, I picked the Cardinals, you picked the Bears. The Cardinals won. We're getting to a little bit of a trend here, but it looked like Kyler Murray and Caleb Williams had bad games in this one. It was brutal starting Kyler Murray in fantasy this last week, even though the Cardinals won. You have to wonder when the Bears are going to fire their head coach, Eberflus, but it looks like they're going to continue to roll with him for this week, which is interesting. But we are talking offline how if the Bears do fire Eberflus this season or after the season, that this is the third straight quarterback that will have their second head coach in year two. And that is not very good. So they're going to ruin another potential franchise quarterback here. And Caleb Williams and DJ Moore, they all look disinterested to some level, which is not good. And it looks like Odunze is overtaking the number one because of the disinterest, but we'll see if that keeps up. But what do you make of your boy Connor getting the most rushes and yards, but DeMarcado and Trey Benson coming away with the rushing touchdowns?
Well, DeMarcado was a 53-yard touchdown. So, I mean, that's a little bit different. But I like that Trey Benson is getting more touches. I hope that's a trend that continues. Connor's always just been reliable. Like, he's not going to blow the lid on fantasy production, but he's going to be very good every week, at least in RB. I am a little bit more shocked in the fact that Chicago didn't really shut down the Cardinals' run game. Because I feel like that was the number one thing for them to key on, and they didn't do a very good job of it. So that was kind of concerning to me. And I don't think it's a surprise that Caleb Williams struggled. I kind of expected him to struggle in a lot of games this year, and I think Arizona's defense is starting to get better as well. I think we can expect more games like this for Chicago, at least on their offense, going forward.
Absolutely. All right. So another victory and another loss. Victory for me and loss for you. All right. So we can hop over to the Jags at the Eagles here. And Lawrence struggles through the air, but scores 2 rushing touchdowns. And the Eagles did win this game. It was a much closer game than we thought it was going to be. We both picked the Eagles. We both won the game. AJ Brown hurt his knee. Apparently it's not that serious, but anytime there's a knee involved, it feels pretty serious. And Jalen Hurts had another big game. So it does seem like he is a fantasy starter, a lock-it-in kind of guy going forward. But we both picked Philly and we both won.
They almost blew this game to Jacksonville. They were like destroying them. And then last second, it seemed like Jacksonville might have beaten them.
Absolutely. Great. Anything else to add to the game here before we go to the game?
I think Jacksonville season's over. I think it's officially over.
Do you think the Texans have the division already locked?
Yeah, I think basically no matter what, the Texans win the division.
Okay. So the next game on the docket is the Lions at the Packers. You got this one right, and I got this one wrong. The Detroit Lions went into Lambeau Field and won, which is really interesting because not very many people go into Lambeau Field and win. Jared Goff had another lackluster game as far as fantasy wise goes. And I know we talked about that a little bit offline, and you really like their run game and their ability to control the ball. I did notice that Jaden Reed had another good game, which is good because it kind of keeps him into the wide receiver one, wide receiver two phylum. And the bye week for Jordan Love comes at a great time considering all the injuries he's dealt with early in the season. So hopefully they come back strong.
I'll just say the Jaden Reed stats really came after Brian Branch left the game. I think he got ejected in the game, is from my memory. So once he was out, Jaden Reed kind of took off from that point.
Right. That is an interesting thing to look out for, but I'm a big Jaden Reed believer, so we'll have to keep him in our top. What would you say? Jaden Reed's a top 24 wide receiver?
I would say top 20 at this point.
Okay. I mean, his stats are much higher than that. His stats are coming in at wide receiver 6 on the year, but he's had some down weeks the last couple of weeks. So that is interesting. Wide receiver 6. I remember when I felt like in the teens was too high to have him, but
yeah. But Cooper Kupp has missed a lot of time. Puka Nacua has missed a lot of time. Nico Collins has missed some time. I mean, who else? Didn't A.J. Brown miss a couple weeks? We have both wide receivers in Miami have missed their quarterback for most of the year, and the offense has been lackluster. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys disappointing or been hurt so far this year. I think realistically, if all things are healthy and all things are functioning, it is at least a top 20 guy still.
Yeah.
Which means at least a wide receiver too. Starting in every fantasy team.
Absolutely. Right. So we have 3 games left to discuss. And that was a great game too, by the way, the one that we just talked about, because that was for the division lead, and Detroit's in the driver's seat now for the division title because of that victory. But the next one was another divisional matchup. It's the Rams at the Seahawks. We both picked the Rams. The Rams won in overtime. Geno has a huge but sloppy game, and he really does miss DK Metcalf in the lineup. Puka was ejected for frivolous reasons, and Cooper Kupp benefits from that one, and it looks like JSN finally has his breakout game. So anything I missed on this game, we both picked the Rams.
You think
and we both
Puka
won.
was ejected for a frivolous reason?
Yeah. I mean, he
threw a punch. The rules are the rules. You always say that.
Are the rules. They are. I'll give you that. But
I'll say that it was the weakest hit and weakest toss I've seen, because there's guys I feel like have done more and stayed in the game. But
and it was to the helmet. It was to the helmet, which Puka would probably more break his hand if he went forward than hurt the guy. So I don't like it for that reason, but you're right. The rules are the rules, black and white. But he doesn't really seem like a guy that loses his cool, so I'd love to know the whole story about that.
Yeah.
There has to be more, right?
I would think so. He really doesn't seem like the guy to get that flustered.
Exactly. Next up is the Colts at the Vikings. And this was a sloppy game. A lot of turnovers in the first half. Indy looked lost on offense. Darnold overcomes his bad mistakes. But also, I did notice that they let Darnold throw the ball with the lead to ice the game. So that is actually a sign of confidence for Sam Darnold. I don't see how the Vikings don't make the playoffs at this point, because they have such a strong record going into week 10. And they also got one of their best short yardage completion guys in TJ Hawkinson back. So I know he roughly ran half of the snaps, so I expect that to increase week over week going forward.
Yeah, what a coincidence that Indianapolis struggled in this one with Joe Flacco. It's almost like it's past his bedtime. Sleepy Joe didn't look much better than Anthony Richardson. I think he barely had a 50% passer rating, or completion rating or whatever in this one. So maybe a 40-year-old at late night game, primetime game probably isn't the best thing to do. Sleepy Joe wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. It's his bedtime.
So this is the game they should have started Richardson and put Joe
Yeah,
Flacco to
yeah.
bed.
I think Flacco should start every noon game and Richardson should start the nighttime games. That's what I think.
Got it. I got it. Great. Anything else to add to this game? They're still doubling down on Joe Flacco, though, so I don't see any moving
Yeah,
back to
I'm
Anthony
extremely
Richardson.
frustrated with Adonai Mitchell and Michael Pittman's usage for this team. It seems like all they do is pass along the sideline or over the middle, and it's either going to be Josh Downs or Alec Pierce. I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it may be Ashton Doolin got seen too much on the screen. I felt like every time I was like watching the Colts offense, number 16 was out there and moving around and getting targeted, and they have a million other guys that they didn't even really use. So I don't know if it's the Colts offense in general or what the issue is, but get the ball to your actual playmakers. I'm sick of this team.
Yeah, they don't like Michael Pittman. He's on a milk carton somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
They should have traded him, man. Like, if you're
They
not
couldn't. They
using
just
him,
gave him
trade
a
him.
huge signing bonus. I feel like that would have created so much dead cap.
Well, then use him. If you're paying him,
I
use
know.
him.
They should.
You're not incorrect there.
All right. So this was right along the theme of before. I picked Minnesota and won. You picked Indy and lost. But yeah, I don't see how Minnesota misses the playoffs at this point. I don't see how the Commanders do, but we'll get into that into the next episode here. But before the next episode, we have the Buccaneers and the Chiefs, another overtime game. Hopkins, DeAndre Hopkins, your buddy here, the one that you always would say would go to Kansas City, seems to be fitting in quite well. I know him and Patrick Mahomes had a few miscues, especially at the end of the fourth quarter there. But those are things that they'll correct over time, and they will become a much more well-oiled machine. Kansas City to go to overtime against a team that is missing Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, they seem to be vulnerable. They seem to have a spot still that they may not be able to go that far in the playoffs. And I don't know if this is something that they'll overcome like they have in the past, or if this is something that'll stand out as the season goes on. Did notice it here. Tampa shouldn't have been hanging around in the game for as long as they did. I know Tampa is getting hammered for not going for two after tying it up, but they also would have gave Patrick Mahomes the ball back with Harrison Butker on the other side with about 40 minutes and two timeouts left. And I like Kansas City with four downs and needing to score to be able to score there. Also, it took them two plays from the one to score a touchdown. So I don't know how a 2 point play from the two would make them feel even that confident right there.
I think for me, the biggest thing for Tampa is not trading for a wide receiver before the deadline. I think that's the biggest issue for them. I never really expected them to beat Kansas City the way that everything was. Kansas City's defense is better, and Tampa was missing their top three wide receivers. KC is pretty good against the run. I never really thought Tampa was going to win this game at pretty much any point, even with Patrick Mahomes looking like Derek Carr for most of the season. Okay,
So
well, do you have anything else to add to that?
we both got that game right, and it was a really good week for picks for me. But I currently have the lead, but you could always come back now, Alex. But I know for a lot of the season, you were like, I have the lead, I have the lead. But I have 86 right this year, and you have 83 right this year. So I now have a three-pick advantage right now. And what's really funny is your 9 3 picks have 90 right. So if you would have just stuck with your September predictions, you would be 7 points ahead of where you are right now.
Well, there's the September was me being Nostradamus for the rest of the season, and the weekly picks are for fun. So As long as I get the key playoff teams right, if I get the number one team in all the land, Detroit, right, that's all I care about. Anyway, Jeff, that does it for this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading and listening to this episode, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
You can find us on all podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy and with our handle at N2E Fantasy on all social media platforms. Please join our community and give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.